Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to see all y'all. Little
Hello.
family
Am I
reunion.
am I introducing you tonight?
You can if you want.
Okay.
Hello, hello.
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 Hello. So excited for you, Tabitha.
Oh, thanks. So far, so good today.
I see a lot of people qualified today.
Uh, I know of several. It wasn't as busy as I've seen it. Some days are really wild in there. So Friday is going to be really wild.
Yeah.
So yes, I think we are looking for folks. We may be looking for volunteers to help on Friday. A lot to get through.
Just tell me when you're ready.
All right, still got folks coming in. All right, if folks would put your in the chat, open the chat by clicking on the word chat. If you're on a phone, you'll have to touch at the bottom of the screen to make the buttons appear. And then click on chat and enter your name and where you are so you can connect with other folks who might be nearby. And maybe also say whether you've already qualified for the SDEC or are planning to.
Hmm.
And I'll go ahead and I shouldn't introduce myself. I was going to do that, but I forgot. This is not my show. I'll leave it to Melanie. Do you want to do it, Melanie?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your days to join us. I'm Melanie Kakwich. UDEVAL, or the United Democratic Volunteers of Alabama, is a grassroots network dedicated to connecting Democrats across the state, offering training and resources, and supporting sustained civic and political engagement. Tonight, we're talking about the State Democratic Executive Committee, or the SDEC. And this is where major decisions are made that shape how our party functions. We're honored tonight to have Tabitha Eisner, Vice Chair of the Alabama Democratic Party, leading tonight's session. Tabitha has spent decades doing the work, organizing, fighting for visibility, and strengthening Democratic infrastructure. And she's here to share that knowledge with all of us. Thank you for being here, for showing up, and for helping build a stronger, more connected Democratic Party. So let's get started. Tabitha?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Melanie, and United Democratic Volunteers of Alabama, a group that I support and love, and yeah, I think is underappreciated. So look for more of their stuff. All right, I am recording. So if someone wants a recording of this later, we can do that. I am gonna share my screen. Please let me know if you have any trouble with it. All right. So I want to start by talking about what the Alabama Democratic Party is, because I think a lot of confusion stems from just a lack of clarity about what a state party is and what it's supposed to be doing. And then I'll talk about how the State Democratic Executive Committee governs the Alabama Democratic Party, and why it really matters that we have excellent progressive reformers involved in the state party. So here we go, off to the races. All right, so step one, I want to start by saying the Democratic Party is you, the Democrats of Alabama. You are the Alabama Democratic Party. So Alabama Democratic Party is all the people who identify as such in this state. We are not a state where you register as a Democrat or register as a Republican. You just register to vote in Alabama, and then you can vote however you want. So there's no like official membership role in the way that there would be a membership roles for a state party in a state that lets you register that way. But I would say if you're involved in Democratic politics, if you vote Democrat, etc., like you're a Democrat, you're part of the Alabama Democratic Party. And I think that really matters because when we talk about reforming the Alabama Democratic Party, what we're talking about is reforming how we all interact with each other. My favorite metaphor is the idea that like when you think about an actual party, like a party with music, dancing, fun, whatever makes a party fun for you, like what makes it fun is not the host. Like a good host can throw a terrible party. What makes a party a good party is if the people are having a good time doing stuff that they enjoy together. You could have terrible hosts and still have a great party. And I think sometimes that's where we are. We don't always have great hosts for the party, but we can still have a great party. We just have to make it great. So step one, we have to see ourselves as responsible and capable of making it a great party. Okay, so what does the state party do? So there are certain things that it must do. I've got an asterisk next to the things that the state party is required sort of by law, by bylaws to do. And then you'll see at the bottom, there are other things the state party do, but doesn't necessarily do. So the most important thing is that we have from the national party's perspective, the most important thing is that we send people to the national convention every 4 years to elect a Democratic candidate for president. From the state level, the most important thing we do is qualify candidates for state and federal offices. The verb qualify is doing a lot of funny work there. We're not checking to see if someone is like qualified to serve in terms of the quality of person that they are. When we say qualify candidates, what we mean is fill out paperwork to get those candidates on the ballot. So I would say do the administrative work necessary to have people on the ballot is what we do. Qualify makes it sound, I don't know, like we're dealing more with quality and qualifications. We're not. If you live in the right place, you can qualify to be a Democrat. Some people think that there are other things on this list. Some people think that what the Democratic Party does is pick candidates. We don't. We don't pick candidates. If somebody says that they want to run, they get to run. If they meet the qualifications, by which I mean they're the right age, they're 18 or 25, whatever the seat requires. They live in the correct district, and there are very few professional credentials you have to have beyond that. For some races, you have to have a particular degree or particular professional experiences, but for most races, you have to be 18 years old and live in the district. So that is not something the Democratic Party is not picking candidates. It is qualifying. It is administratively putting people on the ballot, on the Democratic ballot for the primary. Oh, I'm not watching my entrance room over here. Sorry. To the people I did not admit. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so we also maintain the data in Vote Builder, and by that, that's also called the VAN, the Voter Activation Network, whatever you call that data system. We take the data from the Alabama Secretary of State and we process it into this data file that can be used by candidates or by county parties. So that is something only the state party can do, and only the state party can qualify candidates for the ballot, and only the state party can decide if a candidate's being kicked off the ballot. So that's what I mean about hearing challenges and disqualifying. And in general, the state party only does that if someone submits a challenge and says that person's not really a Democrat. So if you've ever thought, I don't understand how this person is on my ballot as a Democrat, the answer is because no one filed a complaint. That's the job of us, Democrats. We have to file complaints when we think somebody shouldn't be on the ballot. You'll see at the bottom of that page, voter registration, public education, candidate training, etc. That's all stuff that we think we should do, but it's not required that the state party do that. Anybody could do that stuff. And if we have the money and the staff and the willpower, we could do those things. But those things are not technically required activities for a state party to do. So again, if we want them, we need to step up as a party and make them happen. State party is funded mostly by the DNC, mostly by the national party structure. If you want to learn about the national party structure, I do a training about that too another time. There are these funds like the Democratic Grassroots Victory Fund that big time donors use to funnel money towards state parties all across the country. We also get money from individual donors and from individual donors, national party. That's about it. We can't accept money from PACs. There is a law that prevents us from accepting money from PACs. So if it seems odd, that's why. Now, we can't accept money from corporations. There is no law preventing the Alabama Democratic Party from taking corporate money, but there is a law against PAC to PAC transfers. Go figure. All of the spending that we do has to be reported in a public way. So there's both a federal account.
Get on the Democratic Alabama Party.
Get her muted. There's both a federal account for the state party and there's a state account. Federal account is used for federal races. The state account is used for state races. There's all sorts of laws that govern how the money gets exchanged between those two buckets of money. But all of our spending has to be publicly visible. And I can, teach you that sometime if you're interested. Not all of the fundraising is public. If you give the party less, gifts of $100 or less don't have to be reported at the state level, and gifts of $200 or less don't have to be reported at the federal level. Money is funny. Okay. So let's talk about the state committee. So the state committee is primarily made up of 210 district representatives. So this is 2 people who represent each of the House districts in Alabama. How many House districts are there in Alabama? 105. Hence 210. So 105 times 2 gives us 210 district representatives. And our bylaws say that those folks have to be balanced in terms of gender. There has to be gender equity. And so the way that plays out is there's typically a section for male candidates and a section for female candidates. We are trying to make sure there's also a non-binary option. Limited success on that. We can talk more about why that is later. But those folks are elected by the voters themselves on the Democratic primary ballot in May. So on May 19th, those people who are running for that seat, if you run for SDEC, your name will be on the Democratic primary ballot in your House district. And only people in your House district will be voting on who will represent them. So in addition to those 210 people, officers can also be members or would also be members of the SDEC, and you don't have to be elected from a district to be elected as an officer of the State Democratic Executive Committee. So for example, I was not elected from my district, but I was still elected to be vice chair of the party. At-large representatives then are they are elected in order to reach our diversity goals. So when we elect those 210 people, when you go to qualify, you will have to indicate your race and your gender. You should have to also identify LGBTQ status, although that's not on the qualifying form. And you also have to identify your age, whether you're 35 and under or over 35. Because we want to have adequate representation of young people, of LGBTQ people, of Black, of Hispanic, of Native American. So if there's not adequate representation of one of those groups, then additional people get added to the state committee at large. And to make sure that our committee reflects the diversity of our state. Last but not least, anyone who is a member of the DNC and is from Alabama, lives in Alabama, is an Alabama voter, is also automatically on the state committee. All right. So here are your officers, current officers. All of these folks, almost all of these folks were elected in August of 2022. So you can see Randy Kelly is our chair and I'm vice chair. And we have these other folks. The vice chair for minority affairs, I believe the bylaws now call that the vice chair for the Black Caucus. So rather than having the vice chair of the Black Caucus be the vice chair for minority affairs, that's kind of how it used to operate. Now it's just the vice chair for the Black Caucus. But none of the other caucuses have an officer. Well, the youth does, but LGBTQ, Hispanic, Native American, AAPI, those don't have officers in the leadership team. All of these folks are elected, except that the treasurer is appointed by the chair. Okay. There's also an executive board. So the committee is 210 people plus at-large, plus officers, plus DNC. So that ends up being like 250 people. It's a big group of people. That's too unwieldy, right? To do any sort of like nitty-gritty business. So there's also an executive board that's a smaller group of people. And the executive board is made up of the officers. And then instead of being 2 people from each House district, it's 2 people from each congressional district. So that's only 14 people. We only have 7 congressional districts, so 14 people. And then large members of the executive board are added if the executive board isn't diverse enough. And DNC members are also. Okay, so what does the SDEC do? That's the big body. The SDEC elects the officers. Nobody else can do that. The SDEC approves changes to the bylaws. Nobody else can do that. And the SDEC approves the party platform, the principles of the party. You probably don't even know we have a platform, but we do, as an Alabama Democratic Party, have a platform. And that platform can be found on the Alabama Democrats website. And we'll take a look at the website in a minute. So only the SDEC can change that party platform. And it's old. It hasn't been updated in a long time. Okay, so why do officer elections matter so much? The number one thing that the SDEC does is elect officers. And that really matters because the chair has near absolute authority over everything the state party does. All that money, the chair has near absolute authority over it. The chair hires and fires the executive director, and the executive director manages the day-to-day operations of the party. And the chair directs the work of that executive director, and that executive director then directs the work of the staff. So no other officer has any well-defined powers, any guaranteed powers or authority. So no other officer has to be included in any decision-making. No other officer is guaranteed access to the voter file or anything like that. It is a really executive heavy setup, an authoritarian structure. And the SDEC, the chair runs the SDEC meetings, decides what's on the agenda, and decides during the meeting who to call on. So if you're familiar with Robert's Rules, we use Robert's Rules to run our meetings. And in Robert's Rules, the chair has to call on you in order for you to be recognized by the chair, and you can then make a motion. So let's say the chair agenda was not what the people want. If the state committee members wanted something to be on the agenda and it wasn't on there, a member of the state committee could raise their hand and make a motion to add something to the agenda. But if the chair does not recognize the motion from the floor, that motion never gets heard or voted on. So it's really important who the chair is, or we could change our bylaws to not make the chair have quite so much authority. But right now, who the chair is determines absolutely everything. They have total control of what's voted on in the state committee meeting. And they have total control over who gets recognized in meetings. So it really matters. Okay, why do we need reform? If you're here, it's probably because you agree that we need reform. I'm sure you have your own thoughts on what you'd like to change about the Alabama Democratic Party, but let me just name a few things. So the party has been in front of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. That's sort of being called to the principal's office. We've been in front of the principal in the principal's office endlessly over the last 7 years, just endlessly. So this happened after the organizational meeting in 2018. Let me back up. The organizational meeting is the meeting we have every 4 years after we elect new SDEC members on the primary ballot. That organizational meeting, we recognize all the new members of the committee, we add at-large members, and we vote on the chair, vice chair, all the other officers. So the organizational meeting in 2018 was kind of a nightmare, and afterwards a challenge was filed with the national party, and we were called to the principal's office and told that we had to fix it, have new elections, implement new bylaws, write new bylaws. And they gave the state party leadership, who was at that time Nancy Worley and Randy Kelly. Nancy Worley was the chair, Randy Kelly the first vice chair. They gave them a few months to do that. They didn't do it. So the DNC ultimately stripped Nancy Worley and Randy of their recognition from the DNC. New bylaws were written by Doug Jones's team, and a new election was held. And that's when Chris England was elected as the chair of the party. Then in 2022, we had another organizational meeting. At that organizational meeting, Randy Kelly was elected to be the new chair, and I was elected to be the new vice chair. Then in 2023, Chair Kelly got rid of all of the minority caucuses, except for the Black Caucus. So just sort of cut them out of the bylaws, removed them from the membership of the committee. And again, the DNC, a file was challenged. A challenge was filed. I filed a challenge, and with a bunch of other folks as well. And we went in front of the DNC and argued that we needed to have those caucuses reinstated, and that happened. Then more recently, in 2025, there was an election for new DNC committee members. That wasn't done appropriately. Again, the DNC called us to the principal's office. So we just keep having problems. In addition, anyone who's been to an SDEC meeting, has anybody been? Will you raise your hand or wave or say something in the chat if you've been to an SDEC meeting? Yes, wonderful. On a scale from 0 to 5, where 0 is it was a total nightmare and 5 was it was a brilliant meeting, just put some numbers in the chat. We've got a -99. Excellent. Yes. 2. All right. 0. So anyway, they're kind of a nightmare. Some of the things you will see in SDEC meetings is that, well, for a long time, there was no accessibility. So everything was stairs. It continues to be that there's rarely a ramp provided to get onto the dais for anyone who's disabled. There's usually not, there used to at least not be a screen, so you couldn't see well. The audio was bad. There's no assistance for audio assistance. There's no interpreter. So that's gotten a little bit better more recently, but it's been a real fight all along the way. It's been, sometimes meetings last for 8 hours with no food. Sometimes meetings are often non-transparent. You can't tell what's going on. Yeah, chaotic. We often don't reach quorum. Quorum is 40% of the committee. So of the 250 people, we need to have 100. And we rarely meet it. They're just generally miserable meetings. And then again, the chair doesn't call on people. So people are saying, I don't think that's how that works. And the chair's like, I don't care. We're going to move on anyway. So yeah, it's been rough. And calls to fix these things have pretty much been roundly ignored. I would say the accessibility has made the most progress in terms of having a interpreter present, and having live transcription of the meetings. So that's been like one little, and big credit goes to Josh Raby, who has been pushing endlessly for that. But in general, the meetings are just kind of a nightmare, and it's very obvious that like no one's happy with the meeting, and that's why quorum is so hard to meet. Also, we generally only get 10 days notice about a meeting. We've pushed officially now, we're supposed to get 30 days notice of a meeting, but it's really hard to plan a meeting plan to be in Montgomery for a full Saturday without at least a month's notice that you're going to have to do that. I saw somebody asked in the chat about the unseating of the minority caucuses. So this was the Hispanic caucus, the Native American caucus, the AAPI caucus, the LGBTQ caucus, and the youth caucus were disbanded. And that was an unfortunate thing. And without notice, they were disbanded. So there was just a meeting where people showed up for the meeting and they were told, no, you're no longer on the committee. And it wasn't done anyway. It wasn't done consistently. There was no notice. And like, then after they had kicked all those people out, then they took a vote and said, vote to amend the bylaws to no longer recognize those groups. And guess what? Once you kicked all those people out of the room, the motion passed. Not without controversy, but then they claimed the motion passed. But I would say there wasn't quorum. There were all these people were not allowed to be seated. It was really unjust. So I guess more broadly speaking, the dysfunction of our party is hurting our brand. It is hard enough to be a Democrat in Alabama without also having to explain to people why our party leadership is fighting with one another. I don't want to be fighting with anybody. I ran for elections saying, I will work with Randy Kelly. We weren't running on the same slate. I knew it was going to be rough, but I was willing to give it a shot because we've got to find a way to come together. I got elected and I thought, okay, people want to see us work together. Let's do this. And immediately the chair said, you have no rights or responsibilities as vice chair. Not a one. Go home. I'll call you if I need you. And hint, I'm not going to call. And he has not called at any point. I'm not allowed an email address. I'm not allowed in the office without supervision. Like, I don't have access to Vote Builder. None of it. So there's not a team attitude. It's just, and basic things like after a meeting, we should have minutes. The bylaws say we should have minutes from the meeting, but we don't get minutes from the meeting. Like, these are just basic operating things that are not happening. So the dysfunction of this, and of course it's been in the news endlessly, how bad we're screwing up. Okay, so one question you might ask is it even possible? It feels hopeless. I hear people say that. It feels really hopeless, but it is not. It would not be that hard to elect new leadership. In 2022, Chris England was chair. He was running the party. Yes, no minutes does violate Robert's rules, but here we are. We violate Robert's rules every time we meet. So in 2022, there was no effort to recruit new people for the SDEC that I'm aware of. I didn't do it. I thought the current leadership was going to handle that. They did not. There was no grand effort to recruit people. And the result was that there weren't, a lot of reform-minded folks elected to the state committee. Nonetheless, Chair Kelly won the race for chairman by a very small margin, 104 votes out of 202 votes cast. And if you're paying attention, one thing you should notice is 202 votes cast. The committee is more than 202 people, right? The 210 plus all of the at-large people, and we added a ton of at-large people that year. And the DNC members, so it should have been a much larger group of people. But there were vacancies because there were seats that no one ran for. Of the 210, there were 18 vacancies. Only 150, there were 47 people who got elected in May and didn't show up in August to the meeting. So lots of things happened that made the group smaller than it should have been. Nonetheless, it was quorum. And in addition, a bunch of people left. The day took so long, that meeting took so long that people left before we got to the point of voting for chair. Like, walked out, went home. Now, to be fair, we were all really hungry. There was no food and it was miserable. But all of that is to say, even after all of that, we still almost won that race for chair. just barely lost 104 out of 202 votes. So the fact that we are organized this year and pushing to have more people who really care about the party running for that SDEC position, I think we're going to win this easy peasy. But always make sure you have twice the votes you think you need. So, important to know when we're talking about running for SDEC, this is on the primary ballot. There are no runoffs. So whoever gets the most votes wins. Even if there are 5 people running and one person gets 25% of the votes, that person wins. You do not have to get over 50%. I see a question in the chat about, can you run for both SDEC and something else? Yes, you can run for more than one. You can run for a state ledge position and SDEC. SDEC can be tacked on to anything. We will have some of our state representatives are sitting members of the state legislature. Some of them will be running for SDEC seats. Totally allowed. Important to know also that the old guard votes more in primaries than young people do. So if we want to get young people elected to the SDEC, we're going to have to get young people to show up to the Democratic primary. So there is much more work to be done. After we get folks qualified to run, we still need to turn out the vote and get folks to actually show up for the vote. All right, what kinds of things do I think reform looks like? And it's not just me. There are a number of people who've been talking about this, and we've identified some things that we think we mean when we say reform. So one of them is the list of people who are on the State Democratic Executive Committee should be public. Right now, you might notice that if you go hunting for it, you will never find a list of who's on the state committee. You can't find out who represents you on the committee. Someone in your House district represents you. Who is that? Good luck finding out. Ideally, your county chair would know. Ideally, if you called the state party office, they might tell you who represents you, but there is no public list, and we think that's a bare minimum administrative transparency requirement. It should be public. We also should announce vacancies on the SDEC at least 2 weeks before the meeting at which they would be filled. So in the past, no one knew that there was a vacancy. So if Leslie was on the committee and Leslie resigned, and Leslie didn't tell anyone, she has to tell the state party, she has to tell the chair. She doesn't have to tell anybody else. If she told only the chair, then only the chair would know. The chair could go recruit a replacement for Leslie. And when you show up to the meeting, the chair says, Leslie has resigned, but I have someone here to fill her spot. Rachel will be filling her spot. Shall we vote by acclamation? Are there any other candidates? No, because no one else knew to run for that seat. So that used to be how it's done. This most recent meeting was the first time in my experience that some of the vacancies were announced in advance, which was huge progress. So credit where credit's due. We're making some progress on that front. But that should be a bare minimum requirement that for the sake of transparency, those should be public. SDEC meetings should be notified in advance and not just via a letter in the mail, not just via an email, but via several methodologies. And it should be announced to the public, and the public should be allowed to attend these meetings. We used to record all of the meetings. Recently, it has been difficult to record a state Democratic Executive Committee meeting because the chair has said, turn off all recording devices. Like our bylaws say they are open to the public, but the chair is the chair and has absolute authority. So it has been hard to fight that. So that needs to be established and maintained. We need a qualifying process for SDEC candidates. So there is one when you're being elected like this, but when we go to fill a vacancy on the ballot, a vacancy within the committee, like at a meeting outside of the organizational meeting, what often happens is that, like I said, Leslie has resigned, Rachel's gonna run. And the chair says, Rachel's running. Everybody votes by acclamation, and no one checked to be sure whether Rachel lives in the same district as Leslie. So Rachel votes that day on all of the things. And then at the next meeting, Rachel's not there because it turns out, oops, Rachel doesn't live in that district and should never have been allowed to seat in that position. Sketchy, very sketchy. And that was allowed for a long time. But if we knew in advance where there were going to be vacancies, we could people could qualify in advance to be considered for that seat. We also don't have minutes. We don't have attendance lists after meetings. We don't know who was at each meeting. And that is a problem because if a person misses too many meetings, they're supposed to be kicked off the committee. And no one has a record of who attended which meeting. So people don't know when there's an attendance problem. Currently, we conduct elections using the stand-up method. So everybody in favor of it, stand up. And then everybody opposed to it, stand up. And they count or look visually at how it is. But people end up standing for both things or sitting for, and it's chaos. And the counting is like 3 different people in the room are counting. And the numbers keep coming out differently. Like, there are smarter ways for us to do this. So paper ballots or electronic voting, technology has come a long way. We don't have to just stand anymore. And most importantly of all, embrace the existence and the inclusion of all of the caucuses. In addition, we'd also like to be adding a labor caucus so that we have adequate labor representation on the committee. And other groups should also be allowed to have representation. The women's, there isn't a women's caucus, even though women make up half of the committee. Why can't there be a women's caucus? That wouldn't add any new members to the committee, but at least women would have representation. And maybe there should be a vice chair for women's affairs. So some of these sorts of, like, right now, we can't even have those conversations because the chair's not interested in having them. So those are the sorts of things we're talking about when we're talking about reform efforts for the SDEC. Stuff that I think everybody would be on board with. Okay, so one more thing, and then we're getting to the end here. The way that the caucuses work is a little bit confusing. So let me try real quick to explain that. So during the primary, right, people will be on ballots. You won't necessarily know whether the person you're voting for is white or black or Asian or young or old or LGBTQ or disabled. You'll just have a name. But after the election, once the 210 are established, then the chair does an analysis of that data and determines whether the committee has enough Black members, enough Asian members, enough Hispanic members, enough disabled members. And guess who decides how many is enough? The chair. So the DNC has laid out guidelines for how that should be determined. But if the chair doesn't like the numbers that the DNC comes up with, the chair can use different numbers. So let's say the chair, so the DNC, these are the numbers the DNC recommends, I believe. So 61% African-American. So the committee should be 61% African-American. So 61% of 210 is 124. So 124, it should be 124 Black folks on the committee. Let's say we only have 100. The chair then needs to add 24 more Black folks to the committee, but it's not the chair who adds them. This is one limit on the chair's power. The Black caucus would be asked to add 24 new members. If we needed to have 19% youth and we don't have that many, let's say we need to add 20 more youth. It's the youth caucus that picks 20 more young people to add to the state committee. So at least according to our bylaws, which 20 young people is a decision for the young people. Which 2 more Hispanic people is a decision for Hispanic people to make, not for everybody to make. But it is the chair's decision about how many people we're adding, whether it's 20 people or 2 people or none. So I anticipate there's going to be some arguments about these percentages, about what the goals are. I anticipate those will happen. And those caucuses, so the caucuses have been restored except for disabilities. So in our bylaws now, the DNC made us restore all of the caucuses. And we complied, but not the disability caucus. So, and the DNC didn't make us do that. So all the other groups hypothetically will get representation. Not clear what will happen with disabilities. But if we can elect a diverse group of people from the 210, then we don't have to add additional people. So there may not be a lot of additions made after the initial 210. There may not be a lot of at-large members. Hard to predict. Yes, stand-up voting is very anti-accessibility. Good point, Rebecca. Okay, if you want to become an SDEC member, here's what you're signing up for. You need to go to the organizational meeting. If you don't go to that organizational meeting in August, I will personally be so mad at you. And you do not want me to be personally mad at you. Please don't do that. If you get elected, you need to be all in for that meeting. That is so, so important. That's when we elect a new chair. In addition to the organizational meeting, we have 2 to 4 meetings per year. They're generally 4 to 6 hours on a Saturday in Montgomery. And bring your own snacks. Yes, Brian, exactly. Bring your own snacks because there will not necessarily be food or a bathroom break. So take care of yourself. We have tried, when we think it's going to be a really long one, we try to bring a little snack station for the unprepared folks, but hopefully that's something we can improve in the future, hospitality. We also expect that you come to SDEC meetings educated about the agenda. So if, once we know what the agenda is, for example, there could be bylaws amendments on the agenda, please read the materials ahead of time. Please take seriously the work that has to be done. And also, I should add to this list, please also learn a bit of Robert's rules. People will help you, but we do need folks who know Robert's rules because things have to be done correctly when you're talking about a group of people with 250 members. So. There is no dress code. That is one upside. People come in jeans and t-shirts. So no dress code for these meetings. And you do get a seat, not standing the whole time, only standing when voting inaccessibly. The August meeting will be held on a Saturday in August. Super helpful of me, I know, but at the chair's discretion on a Saturday in August. And it is always a Saturday. The executive board typically meets on Fridays, but the executive committee, the big committee that you'd be running for, always meets on Saturdays. And we don't know when if there's going to be a meeting between now and August. If there's a meeting between now and August, it would be the old SDEC members, like the people who are currently on the SDEC. The folks who are elected in May, their first meeting will be in August. So it's possible there'd be a meeting between now and May, but I don't know. Yes, and it's typically, as Brian says, it's typically at the convention center in Montgomery, although we've occasionally had it at other locations in Montgomery. Being a member of the state committee also makes you a member of your county executive committee, a voting member of your county executive committee. So the expectation is that as a SDEC member, you would be coming back to your county and reporting in on what happens at those state committee meetings. Your county chair should be asking you to provide a report on what happened in those state committee meetings, and you should be keeping people up to date on what's going on. If you want to get elected to this position, you are going to need to make friends with people. A great way to do that is to go to your county committee meeting now, if you're not already going. Okay, so if you want to join and be part of making the Alabama Democratic Party better, you need to qualify. Again, that just means fill out the administrative paperwork. You need to qualify by Friday, this Friday. There's a $50 fee for doing that to get your name on the ballot. And then we ask that you be actively campaigning, by which we mean like go to community events, tell people you're running. And we want to be clear that this is not about a particular candidate for party chair. It's not about that. This is about those basic reforms that we talked about: transparency, administrative clarity, notice, getting minutes out on time, all of those basics to have a functioning committee. I could add a lot more to that list that I would like to see. I would like to see us not elect a new chair in August. I think it's crazy to elect a new chair 3 months before the biggest election of 4 years. That's crazy to me. I think we should be electing our chair in January or December after the big election. I don't think the chair should have the level of absolute authority that they have. That doesn't make sense to me. I also think the chair should get paid. If done right, it's a kind of big deal job. There's all sorts of reforms that I'm interested in. There's all sorts of reforms that you might be interested in. Talk about those. That's great. But I think we can all agree, hopefully we can all agree on those basic reforms about transparency, accountability, administrative basics being done correctly. Okay. All right. So let me show you now how it actually works. And then we'll do some more questions. Okay. So here is the state party website, aldemocrats.org. You'll see here there is 2026 candidate qualifying. That's where you would need to go. Under the big header of 2026 candidate qualifying, you then want to look for qualifying online. So ignore the first time you see SDEC and go under qualifying online to where it says candidates for SDEC. Is this big enough? Is that better? Candidates for SDEC, click here.
Making America more white, which is such a weird concept in and of itself.
Interesting. Okay, so you put in your name, your email address, your phone number, your residential address. You need to know your state house district to complete this form. There should be another option here for non-binary, but there isn't. Because again, we have reforms that need to be made. So once this is all filled in, you can submit this form and then you wait. Could be a whole 24 hours that you wait for the party to send you an email. And that email will have, so basically what it's doing is setting you up for a you know how sometimes you can sign forms online and it's like an official signature, like a DocuSign, whatever the VeriSign, there's all these different brands of it. So this is a process. This gets you started in the process. They can send you a form that you officially sign online, and then you make your payment. So that would be, yeah, you would, once you get that email, then you can fill out the official form and officially sign and officially pay. But that second part of the process shouldn't take more than like 10 minutes. The long part of the process is waiting for this email to come. And because we've got so many candidates qualifying this year, good problems to have, the delay has been real. So be prepared for that, and don't wait until Friday. So my recommendation is no later than Thursday, you need to fill out this part of the form. Heck, go fill out this part of the form now, even if you're not sure yet, if you're going to do the second part, you at least want to make sure you have it available to you. So fill out this first part right away so that you get that email in your inbox. And if there's any problem getting that email, you have some time to troubleshoot. Rebecca is asking, good question. Is the 210 made up of 105 folks that identify as men and 105 who identify as women, or just 2 from each district? So typically it will end up as 105 who identify as men and 105 who identify as women. The non-binary option that should be listed here, if that were listed, then someone could run as non-binary. And in that case, let's say there's a male candidate, a female candidate, and a non-binary candidate. The male candidate, let's say, gets 200 votes. The female candidate gets 100 votes, and the non-binary candidate gets 150 votes. The 2 top vote getters would win. So that would be the male and the non-binary in that example. So it's the 2 top vote getters. It can't be 2 top vote getters of the same gender. So even if there were 2 men who got lots of votes, it has to be, or 2 women who got lots of votes, or 2 non-binary. It can only be 1 per gender. Okay, so you get this, then you get this email, and the email has the DocuSign. You fill that out, and then you would get a confirmation email, I believe, and then you would show up. Then you'll know it's all done. When it's all done, you will show up here under 2026 qualified candidates. This is where you can see there's 2 different options: candidates for state and federal office, and there's SDEC candidates. So if you click on SDEC candidates, you can see who all is already running. And they're all listed under male or female. Some of your names are already there. So Rebecca was saying move to change the bylaws to 2 humans from each district. The national party, it is a national party rule that there needs to be gender parity. How that's defined can go a number of ways. Different states do this in different ways, but gender parity is required. And yeah, I can slow this down. Y'all can look at stuff if you want. But gender parity is required. And the chair and vice chair, according to our bylaws, have to be different genders as well. All right, let me see how I did on questions. I tried to see them as I was going through. This list right here is public. Rebecca's question. The list that we're looking right now is public. It's on the website. You can go look at it. And hopefully you'll see when your name gets added to it. It takes time because there's just a couple staff people at the state party office who are doing this work. And after they process all your stuff, then they have to go in and manually update the website to include your name. But the list of who actually got elected to the state Democratic Executive Committee, like who's on it currently, that is not public. You can see who ran, but not who continues to be on it. And at large doesn't happen until the August meeting. So none of that will be resolved until then. The online portal, yes, Caroline is asking, is the online portal closing early? So yes, I believe the answer is that the online portal will close on Thursday night. So the online portal, meaning this form, you can use this through Thursday night. If you haven't gotten this done by Thursday night, you've run out of time to use the online process. There is still an in-person process, a paper process, but you have to come to the Montgomery office and fill out your paperwork in person. So if that's easier for you than doing online, you are welcome to do so. But I assume for most people, the online is going to be easier. But if you don't like the online stuff, feel free to come in person. But don't wait until the last day, because that online stuff is going to close down. Julie asked if we get a new chair, could we rewrite our bylaws? Yeah, we totally could. As often as we want. And there are lots of good proposals that have been made for changes to the bylaws. But those proposals, and there's a process laid out in the bylaws for how bylaws changes get made. If you want to propose a bylaws change, you do X, Y, and Z, and it should be on the next meeting's agenda. Does it actually end up on the next meeting's agenda? Not necessarily. But there is a process. So I think the number one thing we need is a chair who follows the bylaws. Any other questions folks that I have missed? Chris asks, what would campaigning to be elected in the primary look like? So I talked a little bit about that, but typically people have not campaigned, and then what happens is you go to your primary ballot and you don't recognize those names, and so people don't vote. They just ignore it, or they pick the name that sounds vaguely familiar or whatever. So any amount of campaigning is, hugely beneficial. And keep in mind that there is also an organization, the Alabama Democratic Conference, that issues yellow ballots that tells people who they should vote for. You may or may not live in a place where the yellow ballot is a big deal. In Montgomery, the yellow ballot is a big deal. And there are people at every polling location handing out yellow ballots, telling people who to vote for, including who to vote for the SDEC. And so being on that yellow ballot will pretty much always get you elected in Montgomery, because people don't campaign. They don't know who to vote for. So if the yellow ballot says so, it must be good. If you don't live in a place where that's true, you could ask friends to go to various polling locations and hand out cards for you on the day of the election. Or you could get a billboard. You could whatever. But warning on that. If you raise or spend $1,000, then it's a real campaign, and you have to report to the Alabama Secretary of State about the money that you raised and spent. So as long as you spend less than $1,000 on your race, you can do whatever you want to campaign. But having friends volunteer for you doesn't count as $1,000. So I encourage you to do that. And we'll keep having phone calls after qualifying to talk more about like how you could run. But for now, qualifying is the big important step. And very often, as you can see on this list of qualified candidates, very often there's not that many candidates. So we have a few where here, for example, there are 2 candidates running for District 2 female, but in many cases there's not. Only 1 person running in District 3 for female and only 1 for male. So in a lot of places, there's not going to be competition. You'll just get elected. In some places, there will be competition. And we can talk more about how to campaign. Anybody else have questions? Oh, I've got 10 new comments. If there's no male running, but 2 females running, the top male will win, and there will be a vacancy for female. John is asking, do I need a separate campaign committee for SDEC? Great question. I don't know. And yeah, it is confusing that there's not a SDEC option on the FCPA website. So the Secretary of State's Fair Campaign Practices Act. So if you're going to spend more than $1,000, get in touch and we'll figure out a solution. I don't want you to get in trouble. But we've never had that come up.
I'm already running for office, so I was wanting to know if I needed a separate campaign committee if I'm running for 2 separate offices.
So I would say if you're running for office, you will get name recognition by running for the other office.
Right.
And you don't need to campaign specifically for SDEC.
Okay. Well, all right. I'm seeing that I'm not the only person considering doing that.
True. Oh yeah, it might have to be a PAC if you're for SDEC. Chris asked a great question about at-large members and gender parity. So I gave the example earlier that it's possible that there aren't enough African-American members elected to the 210, and say we had to elect 24 additional Black members to the SDEC, or the Black Caucus would be adding 24 more Black members to the SDEC. The Black Caucus would have to have gender parity in adding. So the Black Caucus would add 12 male, 12 female, or 10 male, 10 female for non-binary. But there has to be matching numbers in terms of male and female. Yes, I have a big long list of bylaws amendments that have been suggested, Alabama Progress. We do have a good list. Young, Rebecca's asking about how is young defined? 35 and younger at the time of election. So if your 36th birthday is May 20th, you can still be counted as a young person, which is kind of wild, right? Honestly, I'm considered a young person and I am well past 35. But it's because the state committee tends to be average age 60. So yeah, we need folks to step up. And honestly, like, there are people who know that like it's been the same people for ages, and they'll know that they want to vote for something different. So, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunity here to change seats. And again, many of these seats are not even going to be contested. There's not going to be multiple candidates. So let's certainly not have any gaps. If you are thinking about running and you see people on this list that are already running and you want to know if they're reform-minded people or old guard people, feel free to reach out and ask me directly. If I know the answer, I'm happy to tell you what I know about the people who are already registered. And if there's somebody, so we'll use Corey as an example. So Corey is running for District 19. Corey is a reformer. It probably doesn't make sense to have someone else also run as a reformer in that district, because that has the potential to split the vote. So ideally, we want one reformer running against one non-reformer is our best chance of winning, as opposed to having two reformers running against one old guard. So let's try to be strategic about that. All righty. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all so much for participating and for being passionate about the Alabama Democratic Party. Just as a reminder, the Alabama Democratic Party is a fun party. If you make it a fun party, it is an effective party. If you are involved and dedicated and organizing to make it an effective party. Nobody ever gave me a key to the castle, but I continue to do this work without permission. And I encourage you to continue to do this work without permission. That is how we get stuff done. Don't ask for permission, do stuff. If you ever want to ask for permission, if you'd feel better if someone gave you permission, I'm here to give you permission. So feel free to call me and I will tell you you have permission to do that. Vice Chair said so. All right, thank you all. Have a great, great night. Go get some Democrats elected. Woo woo.